Interestingly, on the other side, Iran, which is traditionally an ally of Armenia, officially at least came out in favor of Azerbaijan. They called for return of occupied territories, which again, I have a feeling Iran is trying because there is as I mentioned last week, there is an extremely large ethnic Azeri population in Iran, almost based on some estimates 30 million, based on some 40 million, far more than there are in Azerbaijan itself. So they may have wanted to play a balancing act, as in they are referring to probably the areas surrounding Nagorno-Karabakh, not.
But hold on, sorry. So I have a question. But so you think Iranians in Iran who have Azerbaijani background or ethnicity, do they identify themselves in that way with Azerbaijan and the country?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
definitely. I
really?
think so. Yeah, there were. I mean, in football matches, whenever there are Azeri teams against some other teams, there are certain nationalists, so-called national. Although it's very because Iranian nationalism is very much actually born out of Azeri population, so it's really weird because the hardcore Iranian nationalists are usually Azeri, and then there are Azeri hardcore, like separatists or whatever. So no, yeah, there were protests in Tehran, sorry, in Tabriz, in Ardabil, in Iranian Azeri cities. I believe 37 people were arrested because there were clashes during the protest.
Interesting.
So yeah, no,
And
definitely,
what about the Armenian population in Iran? Because there's a big
Ar-
Armenian
Ar-
population in Iran as well. And they
yeah,
have a more even, I mean, they're much more identified as Armenian than Azerbaijani ethnics in Iran, no?
when it comes to middle class or higher echelons of the society, you're right. Armenians have a more distinct identity, while Azeris that are second generation or third generation, like myself, uh, are pretty much they usually tend not to speak the language, for example, but Armenians tend to speak Armenian. But when it comes to lower classes, which are the majority of the people, I would say um, they are far more fervent. I don't know how to say they have a stronger national ethnic
Armenian or
identity.
Azerbaijani?
Azerbaijan.
Azerbaijani, okay,
Because
interesting.
yes, Armenians have been, I mean, the integration of Armenians and Jewish people in Iran was always in they were the bureaucracy of Iran during whenever it was an empire. And they've been in bureaucracy and in arts very present. So, they've been urbanized, they've been pretty much integrated into the middle class, they are dispersed. Azeris are, still very much concentrated in certain regions. So it's a whole different dynamic. But
Interesting. In
but
Tehran, are there a lot of Azeris?
oh man, yeah. I
Oh,
mean,
really?
the whole. I mean, it's a joke. Sometimes it's a joke that is said that Azeris or Turks, or Turkic speakers, they've taken over Tehran without sword and blood, because if you go to any bazaar in Iran,
A
it's
market?
yeah, yeah, it's with a lot of Azeri people there. To be honest, industries in Iran, major industries, like people who are, because Iran is still not, it's not still a fully, like, there are not as many CEOs, but there are famous industrialists. For example, majority of them are Azeri. Like Azerbaijan is to an extent manufacturing heart of Iran, to an extent Azerbaijan North. So yeah, very much so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. In Tehran, I mean, it's half of Iran are, like, not half, but at least let's say 30% of Iran or 20% of Iran are pure Azeri, and then the other, like, there is at least another 30 or 40% that have Azeri roots, have Azeri blood. Some, you know what I mean? Like, It's very, to be honest, yeah, Persian Azeri difference is very, it's very problematic, to be honest, because even if you look at historically, if you look at it, both Safavids and Ottomans, the medieval empires that preceded modern Iran and Turkey, they should be described as a Perso-Turkic tradition because they were both, like, the language of military in both countries was Turkish, but the language of schools and universities in both countries was Persian. So it's such a, it's so infused together. Armenia is not as infused, although I would say in Iran it's far more infused than it is in Turkey due to the last 100 years. Yeah. So, but yeah, Iran, it seems, I don't know if Iran is, the reason Iran is taking this position, maybe because they're trying to stay close to Russian position. Maybe it is because there are fears of, like, for example, more clashes in Iran. Although Iran did issue stern warnings to both sides because there were a couple of missiles that landed in Iran, and then I believe a helicopter clashed on Iranian side. So they did issue stern warnings about that. That, yeah, we would protect our borders and stuff. The other important development is that Azerbaijan is really sticking to its gun and saying that they're not going to accept France as a honest broker
Oh, sorry,
anymore.
sorry. Before you get into it, just on your last point, I want to ask you a question. So I read this in Western media. I was wondering if you read much about this in Iranian media. But I think MSNBC or NBC had an article about how Rouhani, the Iranian president, kind of said that they won't tolerate any foreign fighters in Nagorno, and I think he was referring to Turkey sending Syrian fighters there. Have you read much? Have you heard about this?
All right. So, yeah, there are allegations, and these allegations have been mostly covered by European sources, that there are Syrian mercenary fighters we talked about it last week, Turkmen fighters that were alleged to have been active in Libya and now are being deployed in Azerbaijan. I watched an interview with an Azerbaijani ambassador to UK, and I believe there was another interview with Ilham Aliyev, the president, and they deny this. They say we don't need foreign fighters. Obviously, we have a far greater, and they do have a far greater manpower than Armenia. And but I mean, to be honest, it does make sense. It does fit in with Turkish way of fighting in Syria and Libya, and I mean, it's always better to. I mean, there is great support for the war right now in Azerbaijan. It seems from the reporters there, although the reporters there are always accompanied by a government minder to make sure, I suppose, everything is in order. But there is great support for the war in Azerbaijan. But when bodies start coming back, you know, that support tends to die down pretty fast.
Yeah. But
It does
so
make
then,
sense.
so sorry for cutting you off. But then, so based on you saying that Iran is siding with Azerbaijan, it seems
Publicly.
publicly. So that means they're on Turkey's side then also,
Yeah, to be honest,
as
Iran has
opposed to, yeah.
under Erdogan and in recent years, because of the mutual distrust and suppose somewhat, you could argue, hatred of the West and Western powers, whatever they are. Yeah, they've been growing closer. That's what I was actually, yeah, that kind of lends itself well to the next thing I was going to talk about. So, as I said, Azerbaijan has, they don't want France as a broker anymore. They say they're extremely one-sided, and they insist that Turkey must be part of any moderating forum or council or whatever. So that's largely because they feel like the Minsk group, the security group for Europe, has failed to resolve this issue. There are also reports, again, these reports are by European sources who are usually extremely biased against Putin, that uh, Putin, because Nikol Pashinyan, the current president of Armenia, came to power through peaceful protest, and he seems to be the first Democrat elected in an election that wasn't rigged or whatever. So some people say that Putin is not very does not have great relations with him, and both Putin and to a lesser extent, not lesser extent, but less importantly, Iran, they seem to have very good relations with Erdogan. And they all sort of again share that mistrust of the West and America and all that. Uh, so that might be another reason why Azerbaijan is standing its ground. Why Azerbaijan chose this time to attack, although when I was seeing a couple of interviews with a couple of professors of international relations, they tended to argue that the uh, the strain between Pashinyan and Putin is somewhat exaggerated by Azerbaijan, and if Turkey directly gets involved, Russia for sure will intervene, and obviously on the side of Armenia. And in the end, their geopolitical interest lies with Armenia to a larger extent, and they are culturally closer Christian nations. Armenians are extremely integrated into Russian society as well, kind of like Iran. There is a huge Armenian middle class. And by the way, Armenians in America and in France, they're lobbying. There are Armenians going back from Europe, from America to fight, to help with the fight. Kardashians, for example, are Armenian background. They're raising money. Cher is of Armenian background, but I don't know if she's involved in any work or anything. But there are both sides basically are. This is a media war as well as a hard war, and yeah, everybody is doing a lot of interviews, a lot of uh, volunteering work, that type of thing. But yeah, well, I think the way it's going, though, the rhetoric seems to be going down during the last few days, and I think we're gonna end up with a settlement where Armenia probably gives back couple of areas of those seven, maybe not all of them, but couple of them, while retaining one or two as a corridor that connects it to mainland Armenia. And I think Armenia then immediately gonna move towards unifying Karabakh with mainland Armenia, so that way in future Russia is forced to act if there is a war or something.